So what is going on, guys? NanoBits93 here with another video, and today I got an exciting one. 2 days ago I dropped my initial impressions on the Folio Touch by Logitech for the iPad Pro 11-inch, and what I want to do for you guys today is do a full in-depth comparison between the Folio Touch by Logitech for the 11-inch iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard. These are pretty much the only two options you have for trackpad support on a keyboard case on an iPad Pro that has those Apple drivers, which gives you that experience that Apple wanted you to have with their trackpads, as opposed to, unfortunately, companies like Bridge or third-party manufacturers that just throw a regular trackpad on there and expect it to work how it should work on iPadOS 13.4 and higher. So let's get started right now. The first thing I'm going to show you guys just real quick before we get started on the intro is the thickness of the two. So I'm actually using the 12.9-inch iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard, and then an 11-inch iPad Pro with the Folio Touch keyboard, because these are just the only two iPads that I have. But for pure thickness sake, the thickness is going to be the same regardless of the iPad, guys. But this is what you're looking at in terms of thickness. So I would even say that the Folio Touch is still a little bit thicker than an iPad with a Magic Keyboard. But now we got that out of the way, let's get started with this video, guys. Okay guys, so the first thing that I wanted to do was actually show you how to open these up, because unfortunately the way these are made, they're both two-handed devices. So what that essentially means is that you have to use two hands to open these up, right? Because you can't just use, you have to kind of dig in underneath to open up the Magic Keyboard, so that's what we're gonna do. And there you have the Magic Keyboard. And then same thing with the Folio Touch, and even more so because this has a very surface type lever back here that you have to kind of prop open and then open up, and then you're into your device itself. So again, both are two-handed devices, just so you guys know, and I wanted to get that out of the way, you know, as we start here. So this is gonna be, again, a full in-depth review. Everything I do on the Magic Keyboard, I'm gonna try to do on the Folio Touch and see if there are any limitations to this one versus here. I'm using the 12.9-inch Magic Keyboard variant, but again, from a usability standpoint, it's gonna be the same thing. Whatever's gonna happen on here will also be happening on the 11-inch iPad Pro Magic Keyboard case. Okay, so the first thing that I want to test out are the trackpads themselves. In terms of size, they look pretty identical. I think the Magic trackpad is a little bit wider than the Folio one, but I think the Folio one is a tiny bit taller. So keep that in mind in terms of real estate. This is what you're dealing with. Again, here are my hands for comparison's sake for the actual trackpad itself. But what I want to do is test out all the functionality, right? So first we're going to start with just one finger, so single finger gestures, being able to hover over things. You can see that the Magic Keyboard is hovering and kind of noticing that it's over an application. If I go over here, you can also see that the trackpad is, you know, responsive, it feels good. And when I hover over any of the applications, or let's say over the control center, or if I scroll up, then that works. If I scroll all the way down, then it gets rid of that. And again, this is all one single finger, you know, point and click gestures that work within iPadOS 13.4 and higher. That's pretty much it when it comes to single gesture ones. Again, the one thing that you do want to do on the Folio Touch especially is go into your settings, go into trackpad, and make sure that tap to click is turned on, right? Because the one main physical difference between the two trackpads, again, this one's made out of glass. This one I'm not sure what it's made of, but it's very, very sturdy, and it feels the same at least. So, but the one thing that you do want to keep in mind is that if I turn off tap to click and go back to the home screen, and then I try to press on an application on the top, you can see that it's not working, right? Versus if I go here and I go to the top of the trackpad, the reason because this happens is the fact that this keyboard or this trackpad has a diving board design, basically saying that the springs, that there's one piece that's kind of stapled up here and then a spring on the bottom, and that's what gives you that click. Versus here, I don't know how Apple does it, but the entire touchpad gives you the same resistance. But if you turn on tap to click, then you kind of avoid that entire situation. So I can just click on here like that, anywhere on the trackpad, even on the top, and it still works. So make sure to turn on tap to click to make sure you get the full experience when it comes to comparing these two. But let's continue on to two finger gestures, right? Two finger gestures moves you between screens on here, allows you to go and scroll on menus, scroll within Safari, you know, simple things like that. Like I mentioned, lets you scroll. Again, these are all two finger gestures, which is all fine and dandy. Now let's see if it works on this trackpad. And again, keep in mind that I guess Apple licensed out their trackpad drivers and allowed Logitech to use their technology to make sure that the trackpad works how Apple intended it to. Versus, again, unfortunately, people like Bridge, other third-party companies on Amazon did not get that opportunity. So again, the 2-finger scrolling works how it's supposed to, and it feels exactly like it feels on here. I sense no difference in quality, no difference in responsiveness. So that's what we're dealing with. And again, you can scroll through your widgets. If I get out of here, again, I can scroll through my widgets on this side. And that's what we're dealing with 2-finger gestures. One more 2-finger gesture thing that I did take into account is when you swipe down on the home screen, you get the universal search. If I go to the home screen here, again, this one's on 13.4, so it doesn't have the new universal search, while this one's on 14.0 beta 2. But again, those are the 2-finger gestures, right? And then the 3-finger gestures is where most trackpads kind of fall totally off when it comes to the iPad, right? Because again, the 3-finger gestures are what kind of helps you navigate through the UI. So for instance, if I'm inside an application and I swipe up with 3 fingers, it takes me back home. If I swipe up and hold, I go to multitasking, and then if I swipe up again, it takes me back home. I can use 3 fingers to swipe between applications, as my most recently used, swipe up to go back home. Now let's see if we can do the same thing on the Folio Touch. So again, 3 fingers, swipe in between applications, it works just how it's supposed to, and you can see that it's very, very responsive. Swipe up with 3 to go back home, swipe up and hold, app switcher, swipe up again to go back home. So 3-finger gestures work really, really well, which I do like. One more thing that I did want to show you guys with the trackpad was how multitasking works and how well it works with this trackpad itself. So if you do want to open up 2 Safaris, it works the same way. You click, you drag, you move it to the right, move it to the left, and all of a sudden you're multitasking. And again, the trackpad works exactly like the trackpad on the Magic Keyboard. So the same function would be for me to go down, open up another Safari, click and drag, move it over, and then I'm multitasking with 2 Safaris, 3 fingers, and I'm out, guys. So far, from a functionality perspective, size perspective, feel perspective, they're identical. These are the same thing to me. Not one that's a little bit taller or a little bit longer in terms of screen real estate. Again, I mostly use these trackpads to navigate the UI. So use my fingers and use the gestures to move everything around, as opposed to mostly a click and point, right? So keep that in mind when I am talking about these devices. So now let's talk about the typing experience a little bit, guys. So as you guys can see, they are, from a fabric perspective, they're very, very different. One, you have pretty much a matte finish, soft to the touch, very, very smooth. It feels nice to rest your palms on here for, you know, hours on end when it comes to typing, right? And you can type away. If we open up a note, start up a new one, and say, don't forget to sub to the channel, right? And then if we do the same typing test over here, it's very different, right? This is more of a denim. There is a feel to it. It's kind of scratchy, but not in a very uncomfortable way. I don't really know how else to describe it. It's not a suede. It's more of a legitimate denim kind of material or jean-like material. And it does feel good to actually type on this. So again, don't forget to sub to the channel. And then again, also keep in mind that this is an 11-inch iPad. This is a 12.9. So the keyboard is going to be a little bit wider on the 12.9, but if you compare it directly to the 11-inch Magic Keyboard, then you're going to be comparing something a lot closer. So you can see that the keys on the right-hand side and the left-hand side are a little bit shrunken down to be able to fit the form factor, versus here you have basically a full-size, like 13-inch laptop keyboard. So keep that in mind. Again, coming from the 12.9 to the 11, it's a tiny bit crammed, but you can get used to it very, very quickly. Within a day or two, I was accustomed to being able to type and switching off between the two as well. So keep that in mind. And then in terms of key travel, they're both 1 millimeter of key travel. I'm gonna let you guys listen to the actual keys. They sound very similar. The only thing that I felt differently was that maybe these keys were a little bit on the lighter side in terms of weight. Like it was easier to push these down, and this was a little bit harder to push down, a little bit firmer to push down, but again, in a good way, in a quality way. And again, that's probably where you see that $140 price difference when it comes to the keyboard. So again, this is a little bit rougher to the touch, but it's not uncomfortable to sit here for a couple hours and get a nice typing session done. Versus here, this is a nice soft touch. It is a little bit different. I probably prefer this in terms of a palm rest versus this one. But again, it's nothing that you're gonna go crazy about. It's still very comfortable to hold and very comfortable to get used to. And then of course, before I forget, the big thing that's missing, obviously no function row keys right here. And then Logitech was able to fit an entire function row, which lets you go back home, change the brightness, pull up the keyboard, get into your spotlight search like that, play, pause, volume, and then again, you can even lock your device just like that. Versus here, you can't do any of that, right? To adjust brightness, you have to go to the top right corner and go to Control Center and adjust the brightness that way. right? To adjust the volume, same way, or you gotta physically press it here. So that's one big advantage that this keyboard has over this keyboard. It has a function row key, which allows you to avoid the software and just go straight to a hardware button, which is nice to see. And then another big difference with the backlight, or with the keyboard, they're both backlit. This one you can adjust on the keyboard itself. This one you have to dive into the settings to actually manually adjust the keyboard. So then now I'm gonna do a couple of just regular application tests. For instance, some people had questions, if I jump into a YouTube video, when you're scrubbing through a video, you can double tap to skip 5 seconds. I'm gonna turn the volume all the way down. So again, you can double tap to accelerate the video 5 seconds with your finger, how you normally would. I just clicked on a random one. So if you double tap, you can just skim through a video. Now, if you double tap with the keyboard, it also lets you skim through a video, which is nice. You can you tap once, grab here, move it around. The 2-finger scroll works here. If I wanna make it a full screen, does it work? Okay, so I guess full screen does not work. Oh, it does when it wants to. And then minimizing the home screen also works. So boom, boom. And then let's see on the YouTube app here, if those same functions work. So let's open up this guy. We'll turn the volume all the way down. And again, so the 2-finger scrolling works. I can double tap to fast forward, to go back. Let's like that video, full screen it, minimize it. So all those functions, they work the same. And again, to go out, you're good to go. So keep that in mind. So all the applications, if they work with the Magic Keyboard, they are going to work with the Folio Touch keyboard, which is awesome to see. And thank goodness, because we do need an alternative to the $300 and $350 price point. So now let's talk about viewing angles, right? First off, we're gonna talk about desk viewing angles. I'm gonna move this back a little bit. When you open up the iPad Pro with the Smart Keyboard, or the Magic Keyboard, I'm sorry, it opens and then locks into place like this. So you are able to see it and keep it at this angle all by itself, but then obviously, this is the extent of the angle that you get. So that is as far as you go. Versus this stand over here, again, it's more like the Microsoft Surface, so you have a lot more in terms of viewing angles, right? So you can go as far as pretty much 90 degrees, and then kick it all the way back and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going until you get to about there. That is the extent of the viewing angle on a desk. So you can pick up the pencil and just start getting all artsy with it, which is really nice to see. But one thing that you don't get is that the second you cross 90, this thing is gonna fall down and close on itself. Versus the iPad Pro, you go below 90, it's still there. You go even a little bit farther down, it's still there. You really have to like bring it all the way down. Look, it's still there. And now finally it closes on its own. So keep that in mind when it comes to viewing angles. All right, so now let's talk about protection of these two devices. So obviously the protection levels are gonna be a little bit different for both of them. With the Magic Keyboard case itself, it's just like the Slim Folio case from before. You have no side bezel, or you have no side protection whatsoever, so you're totally exposed. And then again, Apple Pencil can be knocked off pretty easily because there's no protection for the Apple Pencil. Nothing on the sides, nothing on the top, only just this back hinge part, right? Versus the Folio Touch, you fold this down, put this down, flap this over, and now you're cooking with something. This thing is fully protected. The pencil isn't going anywhere. All the sides are protected. You have cutouts for the speakers. Again, you have the cutout for the 2020 iPad Pro, but it works just as well with the 2018 iPad Pro. The buttons are a little bit tough to press, so keep that in mind. But then again, all the cutouts are good. And this USB-C cutout is also big enough to fit most cables, I've noticed. And then I also noticed this little, on the inside of this flap, if you really want to get like secure with it, I think you can slide your pencil through here, if I can figure this out, to really get a snug fit and make sure that it doesn't fall if you're in a bag, you're carrying it, or whatever it is. So then it's stuck in there, and when you open it up, you just pull it out and charge it up and slap it back down. So that's nice, guys. So this is the actual Folio case, the Folio Touch, very protective. So the next question I always get, especially with the Magic Keyboard, is how do I go into handwriting mode, right? Because before with the Slim Folio Smart Keyboard, you could just flip back the keyboard itself and then you're straight into writing mode. With the iPad Pro or with the Magic Keyboard, I mean, that's not possible. Because again, you can't bend it farther back, you can't bend the keyboard backwards. So the only solution that I've seen is to just pop off the iPad, fold this down, and then place it on top, and you are in, I guess, quote unquote, writing mode, because you can just pick it up and then get to work just how you need to. Versus here, I kind of like it a little bit better here, because even though it's almost impossible to take this 11-inch iPad Pro out, I mean, maybe not impossible, but it's pretty tough. It's very snugly fit in there. And obviously it doesn't use magnets, so you can't just pop it off with magnets, and it's all basically soldered in there at this point, right? So, but what you can do is just close up this back, fold this back, and then you're also in handwriting mode. Again, a little bit thicker because look at what you're dealing with, but you don't have to take the iPad out, you don't have to deal with any moving parts. You just fold everything up and you're good to go. But then again, that begs the question, or the other issue that so on the 10.2 version of the Folio Touch, you could actually remove this keyboard. With this one, since the smart connector is on the rear of the iPad Pro, this does not come off and you're kind of just dealing with this little dangling thing. The only way, or the only reason I would see somebody holding it like this is when they need to take a picture, because when you fold it back, the camera cutout is covered, and that would be the only reason why you would need to hold the iPad and let it dangle like that. But keep that in mind with this iPad and this keyboard. The hinge is very, very flimsy. There's no ridge to it. It doesn't hold it itself. It relies on this back stand to obviously stand up the device. So this thing is very flimsy. It'll never come off. It'll never break, but if somebody just grabbed a pair of scissors, you can probably cut it. But the keyboard itself, very, very, very sturdy, guys. So all in all, those are my thoughts on this Folio Touch keyboard case for the iPad Pro 11. Do I wish that they had it for the 12.9? I don't know, because imagine how bulky that case would be. So that's probably why they only released it for the 11-inch. And again, just a couple more things to add about it. The material, super nice. Like again, that denim type material. It comes in just this one grayish color. The only real issues I have with it are like in terms of design, is the fact that this kind of just like dangles when it's not in use or you're holding it. It's hard to take the iPad out, so if you really, really need to take the iPad out, I don't know why you would, but it's tough to take it out. It'll take you a minute or two to really get it out of there. And then the only other real hardware difference between this keyboard and the Magic Keyboard is the fact that the Magic Keyboard gives you a secondary USB-C cable for power pass-through only. I made this video to give you guys two stories, right? You have the $300 first-party accessory from Apple for the iPad Pro, and then you have one by Logitech, which probably bought the license to use Apple's Trackpad drives in order to give you the experience of the Magic Keyboard, but at a $160 price point. So from a functionality standpoint, identical. You're not getting anything more from the native keyboard case from Apple, aside from the fact that it probably looks a little bit nicer. In my opinion, it does look nicer than the Logitech one, but from a functionality standpoint, the Logitech can do everything and then some because it has the function keys on top, right? And then the only real difference that's hard to describe, especially if you have never used the Magic Keyboard, the Magic Keyboard, when it's placed on the magnets, it's pushed forward to you a little bit, more so than a regular laptop. When you open up a laptop, it uses the hinge, and from the hinge, it goes up, right? And that hinge is usually behind the keyboard, and behind the speaker. It's at the very end of the laptop, right? Versus the iPad Pro, you have the back of the hinge, and the screen actually sits in front of that hinge. So I don't know what it was, but when I was using this Folio keyboard, it was like a little bit, the screen was a little bit physically farther away from me, so it kind of threw me off a little bit. But again, it's hard to describe because if you haven't used the Magic Keyboard, then you won't know what I'm talking about. But if you do use it and you do have it, then maybe you do know what I'm talking about, guys. But so again, hopefully this has helped one person out to make a buying decision. I'm all about saving money and getting the most out of your iPad Pro as possible for the least amount of money. So this Folio is a great alternative to the Magic Keyboard. 160 bucks with full trackpad support. Then you're cooking with fire, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave them below. Again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And until next time, peace.